The first sound was not the dog barking, or the birds scattering out of the maple tree, or even the metal hammer striking wood in my backyard. It was the slow, confident scrape of a sign being dragged across my grass like the ground had never belonged to me at all. I was standing barefoot in my kitchen at 6:12 on a Tuesday morning, coffee cooling in my hand, when I pulled back the curtain and saw 20 people walking through my yard like it was the public entrance to a state park. Sneakers pressed dark half-moons into the wet grass. A golden retriever shook rainwater beside my wife's lavender bed. Two kids with backpacks cut straight past the stone bench where Linda used to sit every Sunday after church. And right in the middle of it all stood Carolyn Pierce, president of the Maple Ridge HOA, wearing a cream blazer, pearl earrings, and the kind of smile people use when they have already decided your answer does not matter. Behind her, two hired workers were driving orange survey stakes into my lawn. Thud, thud, thud. Every hit traveled through the floorboards and up into my ribs. Then one of them lifted the sign high enough for me to read it through the glass. Historic Community Footpath, Maple Ridge HOA. I remember the taste of that coffee turning bitter on my tongue. Not because it was cold, because I knew exactly what she was doing. For 30 years, folks from Maple Ridge had used the narrow strip behind my house as a shortcut to Silver Lake. At first, it had been harmless. A neighbor walking his beagle, a mother pushing a stroller, some teenager heading to the bus stop with headphones on and no idea he was crossing private land. My father had allowed it back when this whole subdivision was nothing but mud, lumber trucks, and half-built cul-de-sacs. He was that kind of man. Quiet. Decent. Too decent, maybe. He believed neighbors should help each other as long as they remembered the difference between kindness and ownership. But Carolyn Pierce did not believe in differences like that. She believed in paperwork when it helped her, tradition when paperwork failed her, and community spirit whenever she wanted something for free. I opened the back door, and the smell of damp grass, dog fur, and fresh pressure-treated lumber hit me all at once. The morning air was cold enough to sting my bare feet on the porch boards. Carolyn turned before I said a word, like she had been waiting for an audience. "Tom," she called, bright as a church bell, "we're finally formalizing what everyone has known for decades. This path belongs to the community." I looked past her at the trampled lavender, at the muddy footprints cutting across the yard my wife had loved, at the orange stakes marching through my property like a warning. My name is Thomas Whitaker. I am 61 years old, a retired county survey technician, and I have spent half my life reading the fine print people ignore until it costs them everything. Carolyn thought 30 years of footsteps had made my yard hers. What she did not know was that my father had already beaten her with one piece of paper, signed before she ever learned my name. Carolyn kept smiling while the workers kept pounding stakes into my lawn, and for a few seconds I just stood there in the cold morning air, letting the whole scene burn itself into memory. That was something my father taught me when I was 16 and holding the dumb end of a survey chain in July heat. Do not argue with people while they are still creating evidence. Let them finish. Let them get comfortable. Let them leave fingerprints all over their own mistake. My father, Harold Whitaker, bought this house in 1989, back when Maple Ridge was still open scrubland and the closest grocery store was 9 miles down Route 17. The place was not much then. A 2-bedroom ranch with peeling blue shutters, a sagging back porch, and a half-acre yard sloping toward a line of old sugar maples. But Dad saw what other people missed. He saw drainage, soil grade, boundary lines, future value. He worked 34 years for the county road department, the kind of man who came home smelling like diesel, wet gravel, and black coffee, with sunburned arms and a lunch pail dented from honest use. On weekends, he taught me how to read land the way other fathers taught sons to read box scores. A fence post was not just wood. It was intent. A survey pin was not just metal. It was memory hammered into the ground. He used to kneel in that very backyard with a tape measure stretched across the grass, his thumb pressed over the numbers, saying, "Tommy, land does not protect itself. People do." After he passed, and after Linda got sick, the yard became the one place that still felt steady. Linda planted lavender along the stone path because she said the smell made the house feel softer. She put a cedar bench under the maple tree, the one with the split trunk, and every evening she would sit there with a quilt over her knees while I fussed over the gutters or trimmed the hedges too carefully. She would laugh and tell me I measured everything except happiness. After she was gone, I did not move the bench. I did not change the path. I barely touched the lavender except to water it. Some people keep photographs. I kept that yard. So when Carolyn Pierce stood there turning it into a marketing feature, something cold settled behind my ribs. Carolyn had moved into Maple Ridge 8 years earlier and became Homeowners Association president 2 years after that, mostly because nobody else wanted to spend their Tuesday nights arguing about mailbox colors. She was a real estate agent, the polished kind, with perfect hair, bright white teeth, and a white Cadillac Escalade. She parked across 2 spaces at the clubhouse. She talked about community the way salespeople talk about limited-time offers. Everything had urgency. Everything had value. Everything somehow pointed back to her listings. I had seen the signs go up the week before near the new cul-de-sac on Briar Lane. 12 luxury homes starting at $749,000. Direct walking access to Silver Lake. That line had stuck in my head like a burr, because there was only one direct walking access from those houses to the lake, and it cut through my backyard, past my kitchen window, across Linda's lavender, and down between my maples. Carolyn knew it. I knew it. And now, with orange stakes in my grass and that cheap historic footpath sign leaning against my fence, every muddy sneaker print was starting to look less like habit and more like a business plan. I stepped off the porch and felt the wet grass soak through the cuffs of my pajama pants. Nobody moved out of my way. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the sign. Not the stakes. Not even Carolyn standing there with her paper cup and her perfect morning smile. It was the comfort on their faces. The way a man in a red windbreaker nodded at me like I was the one interrupting his walk. The way a woman with a stroller rolled right past my tomato boxes without looking up. The way one of the workers set his boot on the edge of Linda's lavender bed to steady the signpost. I kept my voice low. Carolyn, you are on private property. She tilted her head, almost pitying me. Tom, we are not trying to upset you. We are preserving a long-established neighborhood access route. She said it loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. That was her gift. She could turn a trespass into a ribbon-cutting ceremony if enough people were watching. I looked at the sign again. Historic Community Footpath. The letters were green and gold, classy enough to fool people who never asked who paid for the ground under their shoes. You do not have permission to put that here, I said. One of the workers stopped hammering. Carolyn did not even blink. Permission was established decades ago, she said. Your father understood the value of community. I felt that one land harder than it should have. My father had been dead 12 years, and she still managed to use him like a witness she had bought at a discount. Behind her, a little terrier sniffed at the cedar bench under the maple tree. Linda's bench. My hands closed slowly at my sides. Do not give her a show, I told myself. That was what she wanted. Anger looks ugly on camera. Paper looks boring until it wins. Carolyn stepped closer, her perfume cutting through the damp air, sharp and expensive, like something sprayed over a lie. We have homeowners relying on this access, she said. Children use it to reach the bus stop. Seniors use it for exercise. Residents use it to reach the lake safely. You cannot just wake up one morning and erase 30 years of community life. I almost laughed, but there was no humor in me. I did not wake up and erase anything. I woke up to you driving stakes into my yard. Her smile tightened. The path has been open, obvious, and continuous for 3 decades. She said those words carefully, like she had practiced them with somebody who charged by the hour. Open, obvious, continuous. I knew that language. Every survey technician knows when a friendly shortcut starts getting dressed up as a legal claim. I asked her if she had a recorded easement. She glanced toward the small crowd gathering near the fence. The pause was short, but I saw it. No paper. Just confidence wearing lipstick. We have history, she said. We have community reliance. We have maps. Maps drawn by who? I asked. Her eyes cooled. Tom, I would hate for this to become adversarial. That was when she handed me the envelope. Thick cream paper. Maple Ridge letterhead. My name typed in bold. Inside was a notice accusing me of obstructing established common access and threatening daily fines of $500 if I interfered with installation. The paper smelled like fresh toner and arrogance. I read it twice while another pair of sneakers crossed behind me, flattening the grass between my porch and my wife's flowers. Then I folded the notice, slid it back into the envelope, and looked at Carolyn. You just put this in writing, I said. For the first time that morning, her smile twitched. By noon, I had changed out of my pajamas, pulled on work jeans, and walked the full line of the so-called path with a roll of orange marking tape in one hand and my old survey wheel in the other. The little wheel clicked across the damp grass, each turn clean and mechanical, like a metronome keeping time with my temper. 47 feet from the porch to the maple line. 6 feet wide where people had worn the grass thin. 3 feet from Linda's lavender bed at the closest point. Close enough that one careless dog leash could drag through the flowers she planted with her own tired hands. I photographed everything. The stakes, the sign, the shoe prints, the worker boot mark pressed into the soft soil beside the lavender. Then I called a fence company I had used years earlier after a storm took down the south rail. By 5 that afternoon, 2 men in dusty boots were setting cedar posts along the line behind my house. Nothing dramatic, nothing ugly, just a clean, waist-high rail fence with a small locked gate where the worn path met the maple trees. I put up 3 simple signs. Private property, no public access, written permission required. The cedar smelled sharp and clean in the evening air, and for the first time that day, the yard looked like mine again. I stood on the porch until the sun dropped behind the trees, listening to crickets start up near the drainage ditch, watching the shadows settle over the grass. I almost let myself believe that would be enough. It lasted less than 12 hours. The next morning, before the coffee maker had finished dripping, I heard the slap of wood hitting ground. Not a crash, not a storm, a deliberate, hollow clatter. I opened the back door and found the center rail of the new fence pulled loose and lying in the grass. One of my private property signs had been yanked off the post and tossed face down into the lavender bed. Mud streaked the white letters. A fresh set of footprints ran straight through the gap, then down toward the lake. I stood there with cold air moving through the open door behind me, and something in my chest went very still. Whoever did it wanted me to see it, wanted me to understand the message. Your fence does not count. Your signs do not count. Your grief does not count. At 8 o'clock, a Maple Ridge maintenance cart rolled up to the edge of my yard, its tires humming over the wet pavement. Carolyn stepped out with a clipboard pressed to her chest. Beside her was a uniformed security guard from the Homeowners Association, a young man who looked embarrassed to be there. "Tom," she said, "I see you have created a hazardous obstruction on a community safety route." I pointed to the broken rail. "Someone damaged my property." She looked at the wood, then back at me with that smooth, practiced sadness. When residents are forced to protect access they have relied on for decades, emotions can run high. "Forced," I said. Carolyn sighed like I was a difficult customer at an open house. Children missed their safe walking route this morning. Parents are upset. Seniors are upset. Frankly, people are frightened by your hostility. The word hit the air like a dropped plate. Hostility. I had not raised my voice. I had not stepped off my porch. I had not touched a soul. But she had already chosen the costume she wanted me to wear. Angry old man. Unreasonable neighbor. Threat to community safety. 10 minutes later, a patrol car eased up to the curb, tires whispering over the blacktop. Officer Daniels, a gray-haired local cop I recognized from town council meetings, walked toward me with one hand resting on his belt and the weary face of a man who had been sent to referee a problem dressed as an emergency. Carolyn met him halfway and started talking before he reached the yard. She used phrases like blocked children, unsafe conditions, escalating behavior, and public reliance. I watched him take notes while the broken fence lay behind me in the grass. When he finally turned to me, his voice was careful. "Mr. Whitaker, this sounds like a civil matter." I looked at Carolyn's clipboard, then at the fence, then at the line of footprints cutting through my yard again. That was when I understood her plan. She did not need to win the law that morning. She only needed to make everyone tired enough to let her keep walking. Officer Daniels did not write Carolyn a citation. He did not make anyone put my fence back up. He stood there in the damp morning air, looking from her clipboard to my broken cedar rail, and gave me the same sentence people use when they want a problem to leave with somebody else. "You may want to speak with an attorney, Mr. Whitaker." The words landed flat. Civil matter. Attorney. Mediation. All the polite little exits that appear when nobody wants to touch the truth. Carolyn heard them too, and I saw satisfaction move across her face so quickly most people would have missed it. I did not. Survey work teaches you to notice small shifts. A pinhead of metal in tall grass. A half-inch bend in a property line. A smile that vanishes before the room can prove it existed. By lunch, Maple Ridge had already turned me into the villain. My neighbor, Ellen Brooks, called to warn me before I saw it. Myself. Her voice was tight, almost apologetic. Tom, you should look at the community page. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table, the same table where Linda used to fold church raffle tickets, and there it was. Carolyn had posted a photograph of my fence from the most unflattering angle possible. She wrote that one homeowner had blocked a beloved walking route used by children, retirees, and families for generations. She said the Homeowners Association was pursuing all lawful remedies to protect community access. She did not mention the broken sign in my flowers. She did not mention the $500 daily fine. She did not mention that every footstep in those photographs crossed land I paid taxes on. The comments came fast, some from people I had waved at for years, some from people who had never once learned my name. Selfish, bitter, dangerous. One woman wrote that Linda would have been ashamed of me, and that was the one that made me close the laptop before my hands started shaking. Not from rage, from the strange exhaustion of realizing how quickly a neighborhood can become a courtroom when someone else controls the story. That afternoon, I drove 11 miles to a law office beside a dentist and a dry cleaner. The attorney was a young man named Preston Hale with a clean desk, shiny shoes, and a framed diploma so new the glass still looked untouched. He listened while I explained the path, the fence, the stakes, the letter, Carolyn, the real estate listings, all of it. His pen scratched across a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back and pressed his lips together like he was measuring bad news. Mr. Whitaker, if that route has been used openly and continuously for 30 years, the Homeowners Association may argue a prescriptive easement. I knew the phrase. I hated hearing it from him. He explained it anyway, slow and careful, like a doctor explaining a fracture. If people use land long enough, openly enough, and the owner does not stop them, a court can sometimes recognize a right to keep using it. Sometimes. Not always. Depends on the facts. Depends on the state. Depends on whether the use was hostile or permissive. That last word caught in my ear. Permissive. It had weight. It had memory. I could almost hear my father saying it from the far end of a summer afternoon, his boots planted in the grass, his thumb holding down a tape measure. They can walk through, Tommy, but they walk because I say they can, not because they own a single blade of it. I drove home with the attorney's warning riding in the passenger seat, heavy and unwelcome. Carolyn had history. She had noise. She had half the neighborhood repeating her words. But somewhere beneath the floorboards of that old house, I started to feel there was something she did not have. My father's version of the truth. That night, the rain came hard enough to make the gutters talk. It rattled against the kitchen windows, hissed through the downspout, and tapped the old aluminum basement door like somebody asking to be let in. I was sitting at the table with Carolyn's letter spread beside Preston Hale's business card, reading the same $500 sentence over and over until the words started to blur. Open. Continuous. Community access. Daily fines. Lawful remedies. The house smelled like wet wool, old wood, and the last of the coffee burning in the pot. Around 9:30, I heard a soft drip beneath the floor. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just one steady note from the basement. Plink. 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 I grabbed a flashlight from the junk drawer and went downstairs, each step creaking under my boots. The basement was exactly how my father left it and exactly how I had avoided it for years. Shelves bowed under paint cans, coffee cans full of rusted screws, rolled survey maps tied with twine, and boxes labeled in his square block handwriting. The air was cool and dusty, with that mineral smell concrete gets when rain pushes through old foundation cracks. A thin line of water had crawled across the floor from the north wall and reached the bottom shelf near Dad's filing cabinets. I started moving boxes before they soaked through. Tax receipts, furnace manuals, Linda's Christmas wreaths wrapped in newspaper. Then my flashlight caught the corner of a black metal lockbox tucked behind a stack of county road maps. I knew that box. Dad kept it under his workbench when I was a kid. He used to tap the lid with 2 fingers and say, "Important paper beats loud people, Tommy." The key was still taped underneath, brittle yellow tape barely holding on. My hands felt clumsy as I peeled it loose. The lock clicked open with a dry little snap that sounded bigger in the quiet basement than it should have. Inside were old deeds, folded plats, receipts from the 1990s, and photographs of the subdivision before the houses went up. Mud roads, framing lumber, half-built sidewalks, my backyard with nothing behind it but orange clay and tire tracks. Then I found the envelope. Heavy, cream-colored, sealed once and opened carefully. Across the front, in Dad's handwriting, were 4 words that made my throat tighten. Maple Ridge Temporary Path. I sat down on an overturned bucket because my knees did not trust the floor anymore. The document inside was 3 pages, typed on a machine old enough to leave uneven letters. Temporary Pedestrian License Agreement. Dated April 14, 1992. Signed by Harold Whitaker and the original developer, Brackett Homes Limited. My flashlight trembled over the words. Permission granted for temporary pedestrian passage across the rear portion of the Whitaker property during construction of the public footbridge to Silver Lake. Duration not to exceed 18 months. No permanent easement created. No ownership interest transferred. License revocable by property owner or heirs at any time. I read that last line 3 times. At any time. The rain kept tapping the walls. The drip kept hitting the concrete. But inside my chest, something that had been tight for days finally loosened. Carolyn had built her whole kingdom on 30 years of footsteps. My father had answered her from a wet basement with one paper she never knew existed. By the time the rain stopped, I had taken the document upstairs, dried my hands twice, and laid it flat beneath Linda's old glass baking dish so the pages would not curl. The paper smelled faintly of dust, basement air, and the kind of ink that outlives the people who signed it. I wanted to call Preston Hale right then. I wanted to drive to Carolyn's house before sunrise, hold that agreement under her porch light, and watch her perfect face learn the difference between confidence and proof. But my father's voice was still in that room with me. Do not interrupt people while they are building your case. So I did nothing loud. I made copies. I scanned every page. I photographed the signatures, the date, the notary's stamp, and the paragraph that said no permanent easement created. Then I put the original back into a fireproof sleeve and set it on the kitchen table beside Carolyn's violation notice. 2 papers. One loud, one quiet. Only one of them mattered. The next morning, I called Preston and drove the original to his office myself. He read it once, then again, and the shiny confidence of a young lawyer gave way to something better. Focus. He tapped one finger on the revocation clause and said, "Mr. Whitaker, this changes everything." I did not smile. Not yet. He explained what my father had done back in 1992. A temporary license was permission, not surrender. The old developer had needed a shortcut while the public footbridge was being built near Silver Lake. Dad had allowed it for 18 months because he was neighborly, but he had written the agreement so clearly that even 30 years of muddy shoes could not turn permission into ownership. That was the legal spine of it. But Preston wanted more. He wanted Carolyn's letters, her social media posts, photographs of the sign, photographs of the damaged fence, real estate listings promising direct lake access, and anything that showed the homeowners association was not just confused, but actively claiming something it did not own. So I started collecting. Quietly. Every morning at 6, I set a mug of coffee beside the kitchen window and filmed the foot traffic crossing my yard. The camera caught joggers, dog walkers, children with backpacks, and Carolyn herself leading 2 prospective buyers along the path like a tour guide showing off a resort amenity. Her voice carried through the screen door. "This is one of Maple Ridge's best features," she told them. "Private walking access straight to the lake." Private. That word sat there glowing like a porch light left on for the wrong house. I saved the clip. I printed the listing from Briar Lane. I printed the brochure from her real estate website. I printed the Homeowners Association newsletter where she called the path a protected community asset. Page by page, Carolyn filled my folder for me. Then she did something even better. She scheduled an emergency Homeowners Association meeting for Thursday night at the clubhouse. The subject line was Community Path Preservation Vote. The email said residents would be asked to authorize legal action against me for interference with established access rights. It also said Carolyn would present historical evidence proving the path belonged to Maple Ridge. I read that sentence 3 times while the afternoon sun moved across the kitchen floor. Historical evidence. I could almost hear Dad laughing under his breath. I did not answer the email. I did not post on the community page. I did not repair the broken fence. I let the gap stay there, ugly and useful, while more footprints crossed the grass and more neighbors convinced themselves silence meant defeat. On Wednesday evening, Ellen Brooks came by with a casserole wrapped in foil, pretending it was just extra food. She stood on my porch, eyes flicking toward the path, and whispered that Carolyn had been telling people I was about to be forced into court. I thanked her and took the casserole with both hands. It was warm through the foil. So was the anger I kept buried under my ribs. After she left, I opened the folder on the kitchen table. Carolyn's fine letter. Her photographs. Her listings. Her newsletter. My video stills. My father's agreement sat on top, the old paper yellow and patient. For the first time since that sign scraped across my grass, I felt the shape of the ending. Carolyn thought Thursday night would be a public trial. She was right about that. She was just wrong about who would be standing accused. Thursday night smelled like floor wax, burnt coffee, and nervous perfume. The Maple Ridge clubhouse was packed so tight people stood along the back wall with paper cups in their hands and opinions already loaded behind their teeth. Folding chairs scraped against the vinyl floor. The ceiling fans clicked. Overhead, at the front of the room, Carolyn Pierce stood beside a projector screen wearing a navy blazer and the calm expression of a woman who believed the room belonged to her. Preston Hale sat beside me with my folder closed on his lap, saying nothing. That silence made people glance at us more than any speech would have. Carolyn opened the meeting by thanking everyone for protecting community heritage. She used words like safety, tradition, access, and neighborhood values. Every time she said community, half the room nodded. Then she clicked the remote, and a map appeared on the screen. It showed the back of my property with a bright green line running straight through my yard to Silver Lake. Community footpath, it read. Established 1992. I felt Preston shift beside me. Carolyn pointed at the green line with a silver pen. This route has served Maple Ridge families for over 30 years, she said. It has always been understood as a shared access corridor. Always. That word hung there, big and hollow. She clicked again. Up came photographs of people walking dogs, pushing strollers, carrying fishing rods, all across my grass, all presented like proof. Then came the real estate brochure. Direct private walking access to Silver Lake. She moved past it quickly, but not quickly enough. Preston wrote one word on his notepad. Marketing. Carolyn's attorney, a heavy-set man named Russell Vance, stood next and explained that long-term open use could support a claim for continued access. He made it sound settled. He made it sound clean. He never once said recorded easement. I waited until he finished. I waited until Carolyn asked the board to vote on authorizing legal action against me. I waited until hands started rising. Then I stood. The room quieted in pieces. First the front row, then the back wall, then the coffee machine in the corner seemed too loud. I walked to the folding table at the front with my father's document in a clear sleeve. My shoes sounded dull against the floor. Carolyn smiled like she was doing me a courtesy. Tom, public comments will be limited to 2 minutes. I placed the paper on the table in front of her. This should take less than one. Russell. Vance leaned forward, annoyed at first. Then his eyes found the heading. Temporary Pedestrian License Agreement. His face changed so slightly that most of the room missed it, but I had spent my life reading inches and angles. I saw the shift. I turned the page so the board could see the signatures. April 14th, 1992. Harold Whitaker. Brackett Homes Limited. Permission for temporary pedestrian passage during construction of the public footbridge. Duration not to exceed 18 months. No permanent easement created. No ownership interest transferred. Revocable by property owner or heirs at any time. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. My father had done the loud part 32 years earlier with a pen. Carolyn reached for the paper, but Preston gently placed his hand over the sleeve before she could touch it. Certified copies are available, he said. The original is not leaving Mr. Whitaker's possession. A murmur rolled through the room. Someone in the third row whispered, permission. Someone else said, she told us it was owned by the association. Carolyn's smile tried to hold, but it had nowhere left to stand. Russell Vance cleared his throat and asked for a brief recess. I looked at the green line still glowing on the screen behind them, cutting across my house like a lie with good lighting. Then I looked at Carolyn. For 30 years, I said, people walked there because my father allowed it. Tonight, I am revoking that permission. The recess lasted 11 minutes. I know because I watched the second hand on the clubhouse clock sweep around the dial while Carolyn, Russell Vance, and 3 board members whispered in the hallway beside the vending machines. The room that had been loud an hour earlier had gone thin and careful. People stared at the floor. Phones glowed in laps. Somebody's coffee cooled untouched on the windowsill. The green line was still on the projector screen, still pretending my yard was theirs, but nobody was nodding at it anymore. When Carolyn came back in, her face had the smooth, frozen look of a person trying to keep the roof from falling while everyone could hear the beams cracking. Russell spoke for her. He said the board would postpone the vote pending further document review. Preston stood beside me and said the revocation of permission was effective immediately, and any further entry across my property would be treated as trespass. He also handed Russell a packet containing the photographs, the damaged fence report, the marketing brochures, and Carolyn's own fine letter. The packet landed on the table with a soft slap that sounded final. 3 days later, a temporary injunction was filed. 2 weeks after that, a county judge looked at my father's agreement, looked at the homeowners association map, and asked Russell one simple question. Where's the recorded easement? Russell did not have an answer. The judge did not need many words after that. The association was ordered to stop using the path, remove the sign, retract all claims of ownership or access rights, and pay for repairs to my fence, my lawn, and Linda's lavender bed. The daily fines disappeared so fast it was like they had never existed. But paper leaves shadows. The bigger trouble came from the listings. Those 12 homes on Briar Lane had been advertised with direct private walking access to Silver Lake, and that promise had helped Carolyn sell something she did not own. Buyers started asking questions. The State Real Estate Commission asked sharper ones. By the end of the month, Carolyn resigned as Homeowners Association president in a letter that used the words personal reasons 3 times and responsibility 0 times. Her photograph came down from the clubhouse wall. The historic footpath sign came down next. I watched 2 maintenance workers carry it away on a gray morning while the air smelled like wet leaves and fresh dirt. Nobody waved. Nobody apologized in a way that changed anything. But Ellen Brooks brought over a tray of lemon bars and stood on my porch looking at the new fence with tears in her eyes. She said she had always wondered whether Carolyn had gone too far. I told her most people wonder quietly until the bill arrives. Spring came slow that year. I replaced the broken cedar rail myself, sanding the edge smooth until my hands smelled like wood dust and linseed oil. I planted new lavender where the old plants had been crushed, pressing each root ball into the dark soil with the care of someone putting a memory back where it belonged. Near the maple tree, I hung a small brass plaque on the gate. Private land. Permission was never ownership. No anger in it. No threat. Just the truth, screwed into cedar where everyone could read it. The first morning nobody crossed my yard, the silence felt strange. No sneakers in the grass. No leashes scraping the stones. No voices passing my kitchen window before breakfast. Just birds in the maples, coffee on the counter, and sunlight falling across Linda's bench. I took my father's agreement to a frame shop in town and had it placed behind museum glass. Now it hangs in my hallway beside the original plat map of the property. People think justice arrives like thunder, loud enough to shake windows and make everyone look up. Mine arrived smelling like basement dust, folded inside an old envelope, waiting for the right hands to open it. For 30 years, they mistook kindness for surrender. My father called it permission, and permission can be revoked.